I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the sink. Mom's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. "Jordan, honey, I'm worried about you," she had said over our weekly Sunday brunch. "You're not getting any younger, and I just want to see you settled before." I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the memory of her concerned eyes. At 35, I'd always thought I had plenty of time. But seeing the fear in Mom's face, the unspoken dread of leaving me alone in the world, it shook me to my core. A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Jor, you okay in there?" It was Nicole, my younger sister. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Yeah, I'm fine." Nicole raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "Mom got to you, didn't she?" I nodded, unable to find the words. "Come on," she said, grabbing my hand. "Let's grab a coffee. You look like you need it." 20 minutes later, we were seated at our favorite cafe, steaming lattes in front of us. Nicole leaned forward, her eyes full of understanding. "Look, I know Mom means well, but you can't let her pressure you into something you're not ready for." I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It's not just that, Nick. You should have seen her face. She's scared, and I can't help but feel like I'm letting her down." "You're not letting anyone down," Nicole insisted. "You have a great career, your own place, you're doing just fine. But what if she's right?" I blurted out. "What if I've been so focused on work that I've missed out on finding someone? What if—" "Stop right there," Nicole cut me off. "You haven't missed out on anything. But if you really want to explore your options, why don't we start small? There's a speed dating event at the community center next week. Why don't you give it a shot?" I nearly choked on my latte. "Speed dating? Are you serious?" Nicole grinned. "Deadly. Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" "I could die of embarrassment," I offered. "Or," she countered, "you could meet someone interesting. At the very least, it'll give Mom something to smile about." I hesitated, but the image of Mom's worried face flashed through my mind again. "Fine," I conceded, "but you owe me big time." "Deal," Nicole said, raising her mug in a mock toast. "Now, let's talk about what you're going to wear." The next week flew by in a blur of work deadlines and increasingly panicked phone calls with Nicole. Before I knew it, I was standing outside the community center, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. "You can do this," I muttered to myself, smoothing down the new dress Nicole had insisted I buy. "It's just a few hours. No big deal." I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was already buzzing with activity, filled with nervous laughter and the clink of glasses. I scanned the crowd, feeling overwhelmed. First time, I turned to find a man about my age smiling at me. He had kind eyes and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, managing a small laugh. He shrugged. "Takes one to know one. I'm Brad." "Jordan," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "Well, Jordan," he said, gesturing towards the room, "what do you say we face this madness together?" For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad idea after all. "Lead the way," I said, following Brad into the crowd, unaware that this simple decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. I stood in front of my closet, staring at a sea of muted colors and practical work attire. Nicole's words from our shopping trip yesterday echoed in my mind. "Jordan, you're gorgeous. It's time to let the world see it." With a deep breath, I reached for the vibrant red blouse we'd bought. It felt daring, almost rebellious. As I slipped it on, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a software engineer. I saw a woman. The office was abuzz with energy as I walked in. Heads turned, and I felt a flutter of self-consciousness. "Wow, Jordan!" my colleague Sarah exclaimed. "You look amazing." "What's the occasion?" I felt my cheeks warm. "No occasion, just trying something new." Sarah grinned. "Well, it suits you. You should dress like this more often." As the day progressed, I found myself standing taller, smiling more. The compliments kept coming, each one boosting my confidence a little higher. By lunchtime, I was riding a wave of newfound self-assurance when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. "Jordan, honey," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "I hope you haven't forgotten about dinner tonight. I've invited the Thompsons. Their son, Mark, is visiting from Chicago. He's a doctor, you know." My stomach dropped. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm not interested in being set up." But sweetheart, Mark is such a nice young man. Just give him a chance. For me? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her expectations. Fine, Mom, I'll be there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of coding and meetings. As I drove to Mom's house that evening, my earlier confidence began to waver. What was I thinking? Trying to change myself? Mom greeted me at the door, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Oh, Jordan, you look lovely. Before I could respond, she ushered me into the living room where the Thompsons sat with their son. Mark stood up, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Dinner was a painful affair. Mark droned on about his medical practice while Mom beamed at us, clearly envisioning wedding bells. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling more out of place with each passing minute. As Mom cleared the dishes, Mrs. Thompson leaned in. So, Jordan, do you have any plans to settle down? A career is nice, but there's nothing like having a family. I felt a surge of anger. Actually, I'm quite happy with my life as it is. The room fell silent. Mom returned, her face a mask of disappointment. Jordan, why don't you help me in the kitchen? Once we were alone, she turned to me. Honey, I'm just trying to help. You're not getting any younger, and stop it, Mom, I snapped, surprising us both. I'm tired of you trying to fix me. There's nothing wrong with my life. Tears welled in her eyes. I just want you to be happy. I am happy, I insisted, but the words felt hollow. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. As I walked into my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. How'd it go with Mom's setup? I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Disaster, I typed back. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Nick. Her response was immediate. Come over tomorrow. I have an idea. The next morning, I found myself at Nicole's doorstep, still feeling raw from the previous night's events. Okay, Nicole said as soon as I walked in, her eyes gleaming with determination. We're going to that speed dating event. I groaned. Nick, I don't think. No arguments, she cut me off. You tried Mom's way, now we're doing this my way. As I looked at my sister's resolute face, I realized I had a choice to make. I could retreat back into my comfortable, predictable life, or I could take a leap into the unknown. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, I nodded. All right, let's do it. Little did I know that decision would set me on a path that would change everything. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Nicole gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before disappearing into the crowd. I was on my own. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our speed dating event. The coordinator's voice rang out. You'll have 5 minutes with each partner. When you hear the bell, move to the next table. Ready? Begin. I sat down at my first table, facing a man with a receding hairline and a forced smile. Hi, I'm Steve, he said, his eyes darting around the room. Jordan, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The next few encounters blurred together, a parade of awkward small talk and feigned interest. By the 4th round, I was ready to bolt. Then I saw him. He was tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that put me at ease instantly. As he sat down, I noticed calluses on his hands, a working man's hands. I'm Brad, he said, his voice warm and deep. Jordan, I replied, feeling a flutter in my stomach. So, Jordan, he leaned in, his eyes twinkling, what brings a beautiful woman like you to a place like this? I laughed, surprised by his directness. Would you believe my sister dragged me here? Brad grinned. I'd believe it. My buddy did the same to me. Said I needed to get out there. We fell into easy conversation, discussing our jobs, our families, our dreams. Before I knew it, the bell rang. Time's up, I said, feeling a pang of disappointment. Brad hesitated, then quickly scribbled something on a napkin. I know we're supposed to wait until the end, but here's my number. I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime. As he moved to the next table, I clutched the napkin, a mix of excitement and trepidation washing over me. The rest of the event passed in a blur. As soon as it ended, I found Nicole waiting by the door. Well, she asked, eyebrows raised. I showed her the napkin. I met someone. Nicole squealed, drawing curious glances. Details now. We headed to a nearby cafe where I recounted my meeting with Brad. Nicole listened intently, her eyes sparkling with excitement. He sounds perfect, Jor, she said. When are you going to call him? I hesitated. I don't know, Nick. What if? No what ifs, she cut me off. You're calling him. Right now. Before I could protest, Nicole had snatched my phone and dialed the number. "It's ringing," she mouthed, handing it back to me. "Hello?" Brad's voice came through the speaker. "Hi, Brad. It's Jordan from the speed dating event." "Jordan, I'm glad you called. I was hoping we could grab that coffee." We made plans for the following evening, and as I hung up, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing my outfit. The red blouse from before felt too bold now. I changed into a soft blue sweater, then back to the red blouse. By the time I settled on an outfit, I was already running late. I rushed to the cafe, my nerves frayed. As I burst through the door, I saw Brad sitting at a corner table, looking up expectantly. Our eyes met, and he smiled that warm smile that had captivated me the night before. "Jordan," he said, standing to greet me, "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Never," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. As we sat down, Brad reached across the table and took my hand. "I have a confession to make," he said, his expression serious. "I've never done anything like this before. But there's something about you, Jordan. I can't explain it, but I feel like I've known you my whole life." I felt a lump form in my throat. This was moving fast, too fast. But as I looked into Brad's earnest eyes, I realized I felt the same inexplicable connection. "I feel it too," I whispered. Brad's face lit up, and in that moment I knew my life was about to change forever. What I didn't know was whether that change would lead to happiness or heartbreak. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of love and laughter. Brad and I had grown closer than I ever thought possible, our lives intertwining like vines. As I stood in front of the mirror on my wedding day, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the hesitant, career-focused Jordan. In her place stood a bride, radiant with joy and hope. "You look beautiful, honey," Mom said, her eyes glistening with tears as she adjusted my veil. I turned to face her, my heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." She pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you, Jordan. Brad is a wonderful man." As we broke apart, a shadow crossed her face. "I just wish his family could be here to share this day." I felt a pang of sadness. Brad's strained relationship with his parents had been a source of tension throughout our engagement. They'd refused to attend the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences with their son's life choices. "We're his family now, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. "That's all that matters." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. As Brad and I exchanged vows, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the small gathering of friends and family erupted in cheers. At the reception, Nicole cornered me by the punch bowl, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So, Mrs. Bradford," she teased, "how does it feel to be a married woman?" I laughed, still giddy from the day's events. "Honestly, it feels amazing." Nicole's expression softened. "I'm happy for you, Jor. But," she hesitated, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "Are you sure about Brad? I mean, with his family situation and all." I felt a flicker of annoyance. "Brad can't help his family, Nick. He's a good man." I know," she said, holding up her hands in surrender. "I just worry about you, that's all." Before I could respond, Brad appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Everything okay here, ladies?" I leaned into him, pushing away my doubts. "Everything's perfect." As the night wore on, I found myself watching Brad interact with my family. He was charming, attentive, everything I could have hoped for in a husband. Yet there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake, a sense that something was off. Later, as we slow danced under the twinkling lights, I voiced my concerns. "Brad, are you sure you're okay with all this? With becoming part of my family?" He pulled back slightly, his brow furrowed. "Of course, Jordan. Why wouldn't I be? It's just, I know how hard it's been with your parents. I don't want you to feel like you're replacing them, or—" Brad cut me off with a kiss. "Your family is my family now," he said firmly. I couldn't be happier. His words should have reassured me, but instead, they sent a chill down my spine. There was an intensity in his eyes that I'd never seen before, a hunger that both thrilled and frightened me. As the reception wound down, Mom pulled me aside for one last moment alone. "Jordan, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I want you to have this." She pressed a small velvet box into my hands. Inside was a delicate gold locket, clearly an antique. "It's been in our family for generations," Mom explained. "I want you to have it now, to pass on to your own daughter someday." Tears welled in my eyes as I clasped the locket around my neck. Thank you, Mom. I'll treasure it always. As Brad and I drove away from the reception, waving goodbye to our loved ones, I fingered the locket, lost in thought. I was starting a new chapter of my life, filled with promise and love. But as I glanced at Brad's profile in the dim car light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was also leaving something behind. A part of myself I might never get back. Little did I know, this day marked not just the beginning of my marriage, but the start of a journey that would test the very foundations of everything I believed about love, family, and myself. The first year of marriage with Brad was like a dream. We settled into a cozy routine, our lives intertwining seamlessly. Every Sunday we'd visit Mom for dinner, and I watched with joy as Brad and Mom grew closer. He'd help her with household repairs, listen to her stories, and even started calling her Mom himself. One Sunday evening, as we were leaving Mom's house, Brad surprised me. "You know, Jordan, I've been thinking," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Maybe it's time we start thinking about having a family of our own." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? You want to have kids?" He nodded, pulling me close. "Seeing you with your mom, it makes me realize what I missed out on. I want to create that kind of love and warmth in our own home." I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, love. "Oh, Brad," I whispered, burying my face in his chest. "I'd love that." The next few months were a whirlwind of planning and dreaming. We turned our spare room into a nursery, painted soft yellow with little ducks on the walls. Mom was over the moon, already knitting tiny booties and blankets. But as the months passed with no positive pregnancy test, the excitement began to wane. I started to feel the pressure, the disappointment in Brad's eyes each time I shook my head. The doctor's visits became more frequent, the tests more invasive. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford," the fertility specialist said one day, her voice gentle, "but it seems you have some complications that may make it difficult for you to conceive naturally." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Brad squeezed my hand, but I could feel the tension in his grip. That night, as we lay in bed, Brad turned to me. "Jordan, I've been thinking, what if we considered adoption?" I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "Adoption? Are you sure?" He nodded, his eyes earnest. "I know it's not what we planned, but think about it. We could give a child a loving home, a family. Isn't that what really matters?" I felt a surge of love for this man who continually surprised me with his compassion. "You're right," I said, leaning in to kiss him. "Let's do it." The adoption process was grueling. Mountains of paperwork, invasive home studies, and endless waiting. But through it all, Brad was my rock. He never wavered, never complained. His dedication only made me love him more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. A baby girl, just 3 months old, needed a home. We rushed to the agency, our hearts pounding with anticipation. The moment they placed her in my arms, I knew. This was our daughter. I looked up at Brad, tears streaming down my face, and saw the same emotion mirrored in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently stroking her cheek. We named her Lily, after my grandmother. As we brought her home, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Our little family was whole. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. But through it all, Brad was there, changing diapers, singing lullabies, and making midnight formula runs. One night, as I watched Brad gently rock Lily to sleep, I felt a twinge of unease. He was so perfect, so devoted. It almost seemed too good to be true. "Brad," I said softly, not wanting to wake Lily, "are you really okay with all this? With adopting, I mean. It's not what we originally planned." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with an intensity that took my breath away. "Jordan, this is everything I've ever wanted. You, Lily, our family. I wouldn't change a thing." His words should have reassured me, but instead they sent a chill down my spine. There was something in his voice, a desperation I'd never heard before. As he turned back to Lily, cooing softly, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Brad's devotion than met the eye. Little did I know, this moment of doubt was just the beginning. The foundation of our perfect life was about to be shaken to its core, and I would soon face a decision that would change everything. The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me from a fitful sleep. Mom's neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, her voice trembling, told me Mom had collapsed. By the time Brad and I reached the hospital, Mom was already in the ICU. Stroke, the doctor said, his face grim. The next 24 hours are critical. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Brad's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright. "She'll pull through," he whispered. "Your mom's a fighter." But as the hours ticked by, hope dwindled. Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. By nightfall, the doctor's expression had changed from grim to defeated. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "There's nothing more we can do." The words hit me like a physical blow. I crumpled into Brad's arms, my body racked with sobs. This couldn't be happening. Not Mom. Not now. As we entered Mom's room, the steady beep of machines filled the air. She looked so small, so fragile in that hospital bed. I took her hand, cold and limp, in mine. "Mom," I choked out. "Please don't leave me." Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with effort. "Jordan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My sweet girl." I leaned in close, drinking in every word. "I'm here, Mom. I'm right here." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Be happy, sweetheart. That's all I ever wanted for you." Her eyes drifted to Brad, standing silently behind me. "Take care of her," she murmured. Brad nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mom, with everything I have." Mom's lips curved into a faint smile. Then with a soft sigh, she closed her eyes. The machines wailed as her heart stopped beating. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and exhaustion. Brad took charge of the funeral arrangements, handling everything with quiet efficiency. I moved through the motions like a ghost, barely able to function. The day of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the darkness in my heart. As I stood before the mirror, struggling to fasten the clasp of Mom's locket, Brad appeared behind me. "Let me," he said gently, his fingers deftly securing the necklace. I met his eyes in the reflection. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "How to live without her." Brad turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. "You're not alone, Jordan. I'm here. We'll get through this together." At the cemetery, I clutched Brad's hand like a lifeline as they lowered Mom's casket into the ground. Nicole stood on my other side, her daughter Maya pressed close to her leg. As people began to disperse, Brad squeezed my hand. "I'll give you a moment alone," he said, moving away. I knelt by the fresh mound of earth, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with you. I'm sorry for all the things I never said." A hand on my shoulder startled me. I looked up to see Nicole, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "She knew, Jor," she said softly. "Mom knew how much you loved her." As we walked back to the car, I noticed Brad deep in conversation with the funeral director. Their hushed tones and serious expressions sent a chill down my spine. "Everything okay?" I asked as Brad rejoined us. He nodded, a bit too quickly. "Just finalizing some details." That night, as I lay sleepless in bed, I heard Brad's voice from downstairs. He was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Need to move quickly." I caught snippets of his conversation. "Before she suspects anything." My heart began to race. What was Brad up to? And why did I have the sinking feeling it had something to do with Mom's death? As I lay there, my mind spinning with questions and suspicions, I realized that my grief was slowly giving way to something else. A determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I was about to embark on would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I had chosen to spend my life with. The weeks following Mom's funeral were a blur of grief and paperwork. Brad had been my rock, handling everything from the estate lawyers to the endless stream of well-wishers. But as the fog of sorrow began to lift, I noticed something off about his behavior. It started with little things. Hushed phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room, furtive glances at his phone during dinner. But it was the day I caught him rifling through Mom's old files that my suspicions crystallized into something more sinister. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Brad jumped, guilt flashing across his face before he smoothed it into a sympathetic smile. "Just organizing some papers for the lawyer, honey. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. When Brad's phone buzzed with a late-night text, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I waited until Brad left for work before sneaking into his home office. My hands shook as I booted up his computer, feeling like a thief in my own home. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A series of emails with a local real estate appraiser. My blood ran cold as I read the messages. Brad had been secretly getting Mom's house appraised. But why? We had agreed to keep it in the family, a place for Nicole and her daughter to live. Suddenly, a noise from downstairs made me jump. Brad's voice called out, "Jordan, you home?" Panic surged through me. I quickly closed the emails and shut down the computer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure Brad would hear it. "Up here!" I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Just tidying up a bit. That evening, over a dinner I could barely stomach, I decided to confront him. "Brad," I began, setting down my fork. "I need to ask you something." He looked up, his expression guarded. "What is it, honey?" "Why did you have Mom's house appraised?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his features hardened. "How did you find out about that?" "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice trembling. "What matters is why you did it behind my back." Brad's jaw clenched. "I was trying to protect you, Jordan. We need to think about our future, about Lily's future. That house is worth a lot of money." "Protect me?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By going behind my back? By betraying my trust?" "Don't be so dramatic," Brad snapped. "It's just business. Your mother would have wanted us to be financially secure." His words hit me like a physical blow. "My mother would have wanted us to honor her wishes," I shot back. "She wanted that house to stay in the family, for Nicole and Maya." Brad's eyes flashed with anger. "And what about our family? What about Lily? Don't we deserve a better life?" "Not at the expense of my sister and niece," I shouted, rising from my chair. "God, Brad, I don't even recognize you anymore. What happened to the man I married?" "He grew up," Brad snarled. "He realized that in this world you have to look out for yourself." As we glared at each other across the dinner table, I felt something inside me break. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us. "I want you out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Pack your things and leave now." Brad's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. You have no idea what you're getting into." As he stormed out of the room, his last words sent a chill down my spine. What did he mean? What else was he hiding? That night, as I lay alone in our bed, I made a vow. I would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. For Mom's memory, for Nicole and Maya, and for my own peace of mind, I would get to the bottom of Brad's deception. Little did I know, the truth would be far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The truth hit me like a freight train. As I sat in the lawyer's office, staring at the documents spread before me, I felt my world crumbling around me. Brad, the man I had loved and trusted, had been living a lie. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford," the lawyer said gently, "but it appears your husband has accrued a significant gambling debt over the past few years. He's been using your mother's house as collateral." My hands shook as I leafed through the papers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, borrowed against Mom's home. Our home. The home that was supposed to be a safe haven for Nicole and Maya. "How?" I choked out. "How could he do this?" The lawyer's sympathetic gaze did nothing to ease the pain. "I'm afraid it gets worse. There's evidence that Mr. Bradford may have, hastened your mother's passing to gain access to the property sooner." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the urge to be sick. Brad hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed Mom's memory, her trust in him. And for what? For money to fuel his addiction? I left the office in a daze, my mind reeling. As I drove home, a cold determination settled over me. This ends now, I thought. Brad was waiting when I got home, his face a mask of false concern. "Where have you been? Honey, I've been worried sick." I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I had ever been so blind. "It's over, Brad," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I know everything." His facade crumbled instantly. "Jordan, I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "How you gambled away our future. How you used my mother's house as your personal piggy bank. Or maybe you'd like to explain how you hastened her death." Brad's face went pale. That's not true. I loved your mother. I would never—" "Save it," I spat. "I want you out of this house and out of my life. Now." As Brad packed his things, casting desperate glances my way, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't the end I had envisioned for us, but it was the end we deserved. Once he was gone, I called Nicole. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice breaking. And bring Maya. I need you both. An hour later, we sat around Mom's old kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared so many family dinners. I told them everything. Brad's betrayal, the gambling, the threats to our home. Nicole reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Oh, Jor," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Maya, wise beyond her years, looked up at me with determination in her eyes. "We'll fix this, Aunt Jordan, together." Looking at their faces, my sister, my niece, my family, I felt a surge of strength. "You're right," I said. "We will fix this. This is our home, and no one is going to take it from us." Over the next few weeks, we formulated a plan. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to boost our income. Nicole started a small business from home, selling her handmade crafts online. Even Maya pitched in, offering to tutor younger kids in the neighborhood. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the weight of it all felt crushing. But every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of Nicole humming in the kitchen or Maya's laughter echoing through the halls, and I knew we were going to make it. 6 months later, we gathered around that same kitchen table. But this time, instead of bad news, we were celebrating. We had done it. We had paid off Brad's debts and saved our home. As I looked around at the faces of my true family, I felt Mom's presence stronger than ever. I fingered the locket around my neck, the one she had given me on my wedding day. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. "We kept your home. We kept our family together." Nicole raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, her eyes glistening. "And to us." "To us," Maya and I echoed. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Brad had betrayed us, but he had also unwittingly given us a gift, the chance to discover our own strength, our resilience, our love for each other. As we laughed and talked late into the night, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was home. This was family. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together.